Yeah, he's right. But it's what do you mean? All right. So we're going to talk today about the market revolution, the first industrial revolution, and all of its very, very interesting effects. We're going to talk about a couple things that that'll set us up for kind of what I really want to do today about kind of changing gender roles and family roles and roles of children in American society in the 19th century. I don't want a yellow marker. First industrial revolution. Now, here's something that people misput. When we say industrial, we need to mean industry, which is a little different from manufacturing. I don't want to see anybody putting anything about Hamilton supported industrial New England. Now, there's no industry there yet. Manufacturing is fine. But industrial implies what sort of building? A factory, all right? Factories do not come into America until this first industrial revolution at the very tail end of the 18th century and really starts to pick up in the first decade of the 19th century. And the first industry in the first industrial revolution, which starts in England, is in England before anywhere else, and then travels across the ocean to the United States, is what industry?
Cotton.
No, that you grow cotton. What is the industry? What do you make out of it?
Clothes.
Textiles. That's silk. What is a textile? Cloth. Okay, a textile is cloth. The invention that allows us to make textiles in factories is what?
Cotton.
No, the invention.
Cotton gin.
No, the cotton gin doesn't make cloth.
The spinning
Spinning jenny. That.
Oh gosh.
The spinning jenny. Now, I cannot make this is hard for us to get our heads around. It's hard for us to get our heads around the fact of how materially rich you are. You are all richer than at least 99% of any human being who has ever lived, and probably about 99.9% of any human being who has ever lived. No, you're not. And I promise you that you're not. That the material now in early America, the United States is the richest country in the world. That much richer than China. That the average American in 1795 eats more calories per capita than anybody else on Earth.
Yep.
Has a larger living space than anybody else on Earth. More people as a percentage own property than anywhere else on Earth. And yet, the material poverty of 1790s America would shock us. The average person had at most 3 shirts. You had a work shirt. Most people, if you're a farmer, you had 2 shirts. You had a work shirt, and you had your church shirt. And you wear your work shirt 6 days in a row, and then you wear your church shirt, and on that day your wife would be laundry day. And you know how difficult it is to do laundry before the invention of the washing machine. Anyone ever here use a washboard? You go down on a washboard? Yeah. That's hard work. Soap. Soap was homemade.
How do you make soap?
I don't know that. You render animal
Oh,
fat.
don't talk about it.
You take
No,
animal
that's
fat.
not
Unless he talks about it, it's disgusting.
You use a material called lye, which will burn you. It's a harsh chemical. You render animal fat. Any woman on the farm worth her salt knew how to make soap. If you didn't know how to make soap, no one would bother marrying you. It was one of the things you had to know how to do that. Because if you don't know how to do that, is a luxury. Most people have no glass in their houses for windows, let alone for drinking vessels.
So what would go on the window?
Nothing. You close them over with wooden shutters in the winter and stuff rags in the cracks to try to keep the cold out. We're not talking, folks, we're talking about the richest people on earth. Most people didn't have silverware. Silverware is a luxury. You have a knife, which you can cut food with, and after that, use your hands. You wouldn't bother. You probably had one pair of shoes. Children's feet grow so fast that unless it's the middle of the winter, children never wear shoes. That's a luxury that most people simply cannot afford. My father-in-law grew up in a place where shoes were a winter thing. You didn't have shoes in the summer. No.
Well, that makes sense. I mean, in the summer, I mean.
Well, right. But I guarantee you that very few of you run around the streets of Elizabeth in your bare feet in the summer.
Yeah, we do.
Oh, God.
Because the streets of Elizabeth are dirty.
My point is, mattresses. A mattress was an incredible luxury good. Most people, how'd you make a mattress? Yeah, you take a cloth and you stuff hay into it.
Does it have butts?
Yeah. It's uncomfortable. It's not like sleeping on a beautiful, fluffy down mattress. So, and then every year, you couldn't wait because the comfier the hay got, the older it got, but that meant that all the little bugs that were living there when you stuck it in the thing were... Ew, oh my God! Folks, you lived around your animals. That's, like on a farm, if it was cold, the chickens would just come into the house with you.
That'd be funny, yo.
You get out there, you take care of any animals you have in your barn before you take care of yourself. Folks, my point is this. It is hard for us sitting here in our heated and air-conditioned lives with our comfy mattresses. And this was not a poor country. The United States is the wealthiest country in the world. People eat better, live better, more space than anywhere else on earth. But yet, this material poverty was shocking to us in a lot of ways. There's no roads between towns by and large. When George Washington, when he's president, makes one trip up north from Philadelphia and one trip down south, and it takes him weeks to travel along, the rutted roads and the Indian trails that suffice to get people from one place to another. This all starts to change in the early 1800s with this industrial and then market revolution. Gentlemen, any farmer knew how to make cabinets, knew how to make a bed. Not great ones, but enough to use. Women all knew how to sew, all knew how to make butter, all knew how to make soap. Because if you didn't know how to do those things, you didn't have them. Every farmer in the country knew how to slaughter his own animals. That's a part of existence that we don't even see or think about. But every year, if you want a pig, Dad goes out and slaughters the hog.
But you see that in your country, your parents' country.
Sometimes.
I see that.
Cool. Not in America anymore.
Is that illegal?
No, you can slaughter your animals. Mixed red, as they do. They go there. Well, the first industrial revolution starts to change this in a lot of fundamental ways. The textile industry makes it so, for the first time in human history, poor people can afford more than 2 shirts. That's awesome! Oh my God! More than 1 pair of pants, more than 2 shirts. This clothes the world in a cleaner way than has ever been done before. Problem is, how do you make textiles? What do you use?
Cotton.
Cotton. You use cotton.
I agree.
Were they trading with
silk is an incredible luxury good. That there's trade with China for silk, but it's going to come through Europe and it's going to come. Right. The United States starts to trade with China in the 1820s and 30s, but still, to get from the United States to China, that's a 4-month trip, you know, and then 4 months back. So anything like that that comes from China is a luxury good. You know, to buy silk is something that is reserved for the elites who can afford it. Ordinary people are wearing homespun wool. Wool is hot and scratchy, or cotton now, more and more cotton. Remember we talked about how slavery was a dying institution? Not anymore. Not anymore. The invention of the cotton gin changes that. Now, the problem with cotton, everyone knows that you can use cotton to make shirts. Problem is, cotton grows with seeds. Oh, man.
And they have to do one by one, so they don't.
Already?
Imagine.
It's not picking the cotton. This is seeding the cotton.
Yeah,
And after you're sitting there like this, one cotton ball.
That's a lot of seeds in one cotton.
It's full of them.
It takes so much time.
Two.
cotton ball.
That in a day's work, a person could de-seed about a pound of cotton. Well, enter Eli Whitney, who invents this simple and brilliant device that very simply, you put the cotton on a low conveyor belt, you turn the crank, and it goes through these teeth, and the teeth pull the seeds out, and you're left with cotton. It increases by 20-fold the amount of cotton that can be produced in an hour's worth of time. And by 20 times. So in an hour, a person could do 20 times what you could do pulling it out of hand. That is imagine if you got 20 times the amount of gas mileage in your car. Or imagine if the cost of something went down by a factor of 20. This is revolutionary. And all of a sudden, cotton is a hell of a lot cheaper to produce. And combine this cotton gin with the spinning jenny, and all of a sudden you have an economic revolution. With great things that happen. People can afford clothes, really, for the first time in history. It's done on the backs of slaves. That slavery, this institution that was petering out, that was dying, that everybody thought was on its last legs, all of a sudden gets this huge new lease on life. Because now we can produce cotton, and a lot of you guys are pointing out the numbers in your shorthand. That the amount of cotton grown, the amount of slaves that were increased by the hundreds and increased by the thousands of percents. This massive growth in this industry, which was sitting there producing cotton gin, or producing cloth that was being turned into clothing. There's also things technologically going on the farm. Farming is hard work. And several technological advances are going to make it so farming becomes more efficient. The steel plow, improved reapers, education. The more educated a farmer is, the more efficient a farmer he's going to be. What this does, it increases farm efficiency. Anyone ever stand behind a plow, a manual plow? Plowing is hard work, because when you plant a crop, you just don't take the seeds and kind of chuck them on the ground and hang out in your house for the next 6 months until something sprouts. You have to grow wheat or corn, you got to dig 6-8 inches into the soil. And the way to do that is you pretty much take a giant piece of metal, you jam it into the soil, you attach it to a horse, or even better, an ox, if you have an ox, and then you just push this thing through 8 inches of dirt. It kicks up the dirt, you break the soil. And then you take your seeds, you put them in there, you cover it back up, and that's how you plant a crop. But it's hard, backbreaking work to plow a field. For the guy and for the animal. Improved farming technology makes for more farm efficiency, which makes that we can grow more stuff on a specific part of land. Now, we're going to start to see a relationship here. Here's Mr. Farmer. With a more efficient way of farming, here he's got extra wheat. You see his extra wheat right there? That's what that is. He's got extra wheat or corn or whatever to sell. Over here at the factory, they're producing cloth. So there's an obvious trade here, that the farmers are going to trade their extras for
necessities.
stuff. Okay? More farmers producing more extras, more factories producing more textiles. We're going to start to see commerce enter into the lives of these farmers. Now, the question becomes, how do I get from here to here? Transportation becomes another thing that is fundamentally changing. That we're in the early 19th century, we're going to see a lot of road construction, a lot of canal.
How did they make road? Because nowadays we have like cement for it, the back end.
Well, you don't make roads out of cement, you make roads out of asphalt,
Asphalt, yeah.
which is different.
So back then.
Gravel. Okay, so you clear, what you would do is you clear the forest, you dig down, and what you do is you dig down to as far as you can to where some rock is. You pound that in with layers of dirt, and you pound it down, and you cover the top with either usually gravel, or you pack the dirt. You have a dirt road, and you pack the dirt really, really tight. A more advanced road would be out of gravel, and then you drive over that.
The gravel is just like loose rock.
Yeah.
Right?
Mhm. But it's better than dirt. It packs in. That's the point, and you end up going. It ends up not so loose. All right, and you end up driving over a hard, dusty, but a hard surface. Canals, which connects two bodies of water. That's a lot better than roads. Roads are turnpikes, toll roads. Or if you really want to make a good road, you lay concrete down. Or not concrete, cement. Okay, the problem with cement is cracks. Okay, but the Romans were building paved roads. You know, so if you got the money, you can pave a road, not with asphalt, but with other sorts of things. Canals make transport cheaper. That it's a lot easier to move bulky stuff like crops on water than it is to move them over land. The Erie Canal is the most famous, the best example. To move a ton of stuff 1 mile used to cost about $20, $25. So you move 1 ton, 1 mile, costs about $20. Moving it via canal, where you load it on a barge, and then you hook up a mule or 3 to the barge, and the mules pull the barge, it reduces the cost of transport by 90%, $2 per ton, per mile. That's a 90% reduction in your transportation costs. That's huge.
That's a 90% profit too, right?
Then your profits are going to go, whatever your transportation cost is, you're going to be making a lot more money because your transportation cost is much lower. Eventually, not only roads and canals, but what new technology in the 1830s and 40s starts to grow rapidly in the country? It's what? Railroads. Very good.
Good job. Trains.
And There is a transportation revolution. Roads and turnpikes, canals, railroads. Makes it easier to get stuff from factory to farm, from farm to factory, and then out into the wider world. A new political issue comes up, because the question becomes, should government be building these things? From interstate, within states and between states. That the Whigs say yes. The Whigs say, and this gets the name internal improvements. When you see that phrase, internal improvements, it means roads, canals, railroads, science foundations, national universities, the stuff to improve the national economy. Should the federal government be getting itself involved in this stuff? Is a big political issue in the second party system.
It was that the North didn't want to put this out there, right?
It's generally the North wanted and the South did not, exactly. Hello. I don't know why I randomly did that.
You got the code.
Jackson stands firmly against this sort of stuff. He's afraid that all of this improvement is going to make rich manufacturers richer, rich bankers richer, rich foreign investors richer at the expense of the ordinary person. Democrats tend to oppose this. Whigs tend to support it. This is what's called the American system. Henry Clay, second party. It's a big Whig thing to have the government build all this stuff. Jackson says not only is it going to leave the South behind, which is his main concern, he also says it's unconstitutional. The Constitution doesn't say the federal government can be in the business of building roads and canals and railroads, and therefore it ought not to do it. So basically what happens is the states do it. And we're going to see when we look at the Civil War that there are thousands and thousands of miles of roads, canals, and rails in the north, and very, very much fewer in the south. That there's one railroad that goes across the entirety of the south from east to west, just one. And that's going to play a big role in the Civil War. But there's this transportation revolution. More money in the farmers' pockets because they're able to sell their produce at lower prices because of the improved transportation. We're sending it out into the whole world market and crop prices rise. We're also seeing a growth in population, so there's more farmers producing more stuff. Now, what is that going to mean for other stuff? One of the foundational points of existence is if somebody wants something and has money to pay for it, somebody out there will do what? No, they want something.
Build it.
They'll what, Joyce? Well, what's the economic word that we would use? And if someone out there demands something and has money to pay for it, somebody will.
Manufacture.
What's the economic word we would use?
Manufacture.
If someone out there, if someone out there demands something, someone will supply it. That is a fact of human life. It doesn't matter if it's legal, illegal, hard to find, easy to find. If somebody wants silk, we'll go to China to get it if they're willing to pay for it. Crack cocaine, illegal. How hard is it to find crack cocaine? Not that hard.
The easiest of them all.
A lot easier than it should be, maybe. But the point is that if somebody wants crack cocaine and is willing to pay for it, someone will supply it. That it will go to the ends of the earth and avoid government interdiction and, you know, sneak it into, but because people want it. If somebody wants, you know, pornography of a man having sex with a chicken, guess what? Guess what? Somebody's going to provide that. That is a simple fact. You can't get rabies from a chicken.
No, there was some guy that supposedly had sex with a raccoon.
That's so nice. This is really
When I
bad.
was in college, there was on front page of a local newspaper, they caught some guy having sex with a horse.
My life is over after that.
Was it a girl?
Of course!
Does that make it any better?
That's not the part they were using for
That was the second on your sugar cubes.
part to access, another part is easier to access. But of course, this is like a bunch of, we all cut this article out, put it on our doors. Poor guy, poor horse. No, because the horse wasn't there, the horse wasn't getting any money from it.
Yo, get.
Anyway. This place takes you guys forever to come back.
We're back. She would. We're back. Taste my sugar cubes.
When farmers have more money, if I walked up to Scarlett and said, Scarlett, here's $100. What's Scarlett gonna do with that?
Thank you very much.
Spend it.
Yeah, she's gonna be at the mall tonight.
Exactly.
Tonight. She is gonna come out of school and be like, I am going shopping. And off she goes. Because when people have money,
I can buy
they
it.
like to spend it.
Yeah.
And farmers now, because transportation costs are less, because they have improved their efficiency at growing stuff, they have more money. And when they have more money, they make more demands. And when people make more demands, it's not just going to be cloth factories that grow up, but it's going to be a factory to make shoes, a factory to make glass, a factory to make nice dresses, a factory to make hats, a factory to make silverware, a factory to make anything that you would want. And this stuff is going to start to be traded at a greater and greater volume. The farmers make more money means they may demand more stuff. They demand more stuff, factories get established to supply more stuff. The people who work in these factories, first of all, largely, who are they? We'll talk about this tomorrow. At first they're women. At first they're middle class women. Let's talk about that briefly. The Lowell system. Mr. Lowell.
Lol.
Lowell, L-O-W-E-L-L, Lowell. Middle class New England farmers' daughters. It's not like a factory like we think of, big and dirty and fast and dangerous. The earliest factories, yeah, they stayed there. They lived in dorms. And this was like a cool thing that, hey, it gets you off the farm. You get to hang out with your friends. You get paid. There's some rules that, you know, Mr. Puritan descended dad is not going to let you go live in his factory dorm unless there are some pretty good rules. But for a lot of women, this was a big change in what they experienced in life. That they could make a wage and move away from home and kind of expand their horizons. Now, as the demand gets higher, the factories go faster and they're a little more dangerous, etc., etc., etc. And then the women kind of leave and they are replaced by whom? Generally, what do you think? What? Immigrants, mostly from Ireland.
Because of the potato family.
Yes, we're going to talk about tomorrow. All fits together. What are they eating? No, in America. Who is feeding this large population of factory workers? Themselves. And when you're going to work 7 hours, if you're 10 hours in a factory, then go to a patch of land. Where's the farmland in the middle of Boston?
But I don't work by the, like, bosses, right?
No.
The South is, that's what the.
No, South goes cotton. You can't eat cotton.
Uh-oh.
Where, Alexis? Where? What are these people eating? All these millions of new factory workers.
They're eating corn.
From where?
Farm.
Whose farm? Yeah, these farmers. All these farmers that are buying the stuff from the factories, that's where they're selling their food. It all ties together. They've got to eat. They have food. They want soap. There's a soap factory. When you work at the soap factory, you make a wage. You have to take that wage and go to the market in town and buy food. Farms are growing, factories are growing, so the economy is growing. And it starts to become a feedback loop. That the wealthier the farmers are getting with this market revolution, the more they demand. The more they demand, you're going to build a new factory. Labor costs are still low because you have a lot of immigrants coming in that will take jobs for not a lot of money. And standard of living very rapidly begins to rise. That in 1780, only wealthy people owned glass. By 1830, everybody does. Everybody has glasses to drink out of, silverware. Down mattresses, more common. Stuff to, people have more clothing, better shoes, nice hats. Ordinary people. That during this first industrial revolution, market revolution, standard of living for almost everyone went up. Only the very poorest people who are still living on subsistence farms do not take part in this. Because to take part in this, you do need extra stuff to sell. And if you don't have that, you're still going to be living at that subsistence level. But for the average ordinary American, the average farmer, the average town dweller, the average factory worker, standard of living goes up, up, up during this time. That's the market revolution. It's an incredibly important aspect of American history. But it's not the main idea of what I even wanted to talk about today. Because I wanted to talk about one of the most interesting results of all of this. And that has to do with gender roles, the role of women, the role of children in American middle-class society. So, we're going to do that with an example.
Touching my phone, you fool.
Oh!
She's like, I don't want to.
What's a wonderful phrase? Oh, of course it
Ain't
is.
no passion, right? It means no worries for the rest of your days.
But that's a lie.
It's our problem free for us.
I agree.
All right, Andrea, how about up there?
I need a
Take us to
Andrea, I need you to do something for me, please.
You just caught my attention.
She even won.
Don't get ready.
I
First.
Take some money.
need you to pick a husband.
Like Jason.
Jason!
They're the boys, you know which ones they are, right?
Yeah.
They're the ugly ones.
Jason!
Jason, come on up.
Actually, got over boy
Ladies and gentlemen,
I love the movie.
Wait,
I want to introduce you to our
Married couple.
Nice 1790s farm family. Jason and Andrea over there. Now, before I kind of set this up, it is your belief, and when I say your, I mean in general, when it comes to women's roles throughout history, that they kind of look like this. That somewhere in the deep, dark past, which to you is anything before 1980, that somewhere in the deep, dark past, women were homemakers, baking things, wearing aprons, staying in the kitchen, taking care of children, and then after that deep, dark period in the past, that it was a level line of steady improvement to where women could vote and become engineers and have abortions and become president of the United States. Folks, stop and look at me, because you are not allowed to make this error again. That's not true. It's not true. That it is not one simple, women were in the kitchen in the past, taking care of children, they had no rights to a story like this. It is not the case. It is more interesting than that, it is more complicated than that, and I do not want you guys writing any more essays that say, back in the beginning, women were in the kitchen, raising children, and then afterwards they weren't, because it's not true. Now, let's talk about what was true. We are going to make a chart. This is a very important and very simple chart. We're going to be concerned with women's roles in society in this lecture. We're going to talk about a woman's economic role, and we're going to talk about women's social role. Pre-industrial revolution, post-industrial revolution. I want to start pre-industrial revolution with our nice farm family over here. Jason and Andrea, they grew up on the farm, they were neighbors, they fell in love, their parents said that's a cool match, and they got married. Yay for them.
That's reality.
Jason's 20, Andrea's 19, and they begin farming a little patch of land somewhere out in New Jersey, central New Jersey, rural New Jersey. Because we live in New Jersey. Folks, they live on a farm. Where do they work? On a farm. When Jason and Andrea get out of bed in the morning, the cock crows. The cock crows, they roll out of bed, and where are they? They're at work.
I got here.
The next one.
Oh, that was just.
What does Jason do all day?
Work.
He works. What does he do? Where does he work? What does he do?
On the land.
That Jason's role on the farm is gendered. He does a man's work on the farm. In general,
Yeah, Joyce.
I don't know if anyone ever told you this, but that could be, conceived of me as disrespectful. Just FYI. Like, I wouldn't do that for your professor or your boss. Just in case no one ever told you that, I'm telling you. His responsibility is the fields. He's out there at the crack of dawn. He is working 6 days a week, pretty much from the time the sun comes up until the time the sun goes down. What's his wife doing? Working. Working from the time the sun goes up until the time the sun goes down. She is doing gendered roles on her farm, but she is, by God, working every single day. She is in charge of all the, pretty much what she's in charge of is the animals, except for the biggest ones. The cows, the sheep, the goats, the chickens, that's her responsibility. It is her responsibility to make sure that people have clothes to wear. It's her responsibility to make sure that they have, that the food that they have is presentable as edible. She's the one churning the butter, making the soap, taking care of the animals. What are the kids doing? They're working! By the time they're about 3, you can teach a 3-year-old to collect eggs, easy as pie. Once you're 3, you're working. That if Jason starts to have older sons, that's great for him. That means he can plow more land. If he's able to go out into the field with a 15, 13, and 11-year-old son, he can accomplish a lot more in the day.
Wait, is it
And it's
still
free
20?
too, mister.
I'm sorry?
And it's free,
Is he
like the
still
work is
20?
free.
No, he's obviously not still 20.
Oh, okay. Sure.
They have their life together.
Mister,
Three kids, that's
and the work is free.
And the work is free. Point is, how many children are they going to have?
Like
They're going to have a lot.
About like 10.
That your average farm family in the early 19th century is still having 5, 6, 7, 8 kids on average. They might be very particularly fecund and have 14. Who knows? But the point is, yeah.
Did elites have a lot of kids too?
Did who?
Elites.
Yeah,
More money.
sure. But not as many as farm families. On the farm, guys, kids are cheap and useful. That it doesn't cost that much more to feed one extra mouth. What's the difference between feeding 4 kids and 5? Not that much. That one kid, though, that's an extra set of hands for work. Whether it's women's work on the farm or man's work on the farm. And during harvest season, guess what? Everybody's out there getting the harvested. Doesn't matter if you're a guy or a girl, little or big, whatever. You're out there working. Point is, in a pre-industrial revolution type of, and they're dependent on each other. That without Andrea, is Jason's farm going to succeed?
No.
No. And without Jason, is Andrea going to succeed?
No.
No. That marriage is an economic union. That without the other, one of them is going to have a real rough go of it. They are better together. Because there's simply too much work to be done. Unless you have a partner to do it. It's easier to do when you have kids. Kids are cheap and useful. Now, if they were living in town and Jason was a shoemaker, first of all, where does he live? Above his store. His workshop is in the back. What's Andrea do every day?
Work in the store.
She works in the store. She's selling the damn shoes. She's the one sitting there behind the counter, dealing with customers, keeping the books, keeping the ledger. They live where they work. And they are together both heavily and involved in the economic life of their family. Point is, all women worked. Every single woman worked. If you were a woman and not working, guess what? You were rich. Most people are not rich. And the people who are rich are doing other things. They're not just sitting around at home doing nothing, I promise. All women worked. They had specific roles in their work, but it was not a woman's job primarily to take care of children. Because, how did you take care of children? They just worked. Well, yeah, all right, so if Andrea has an infant, guess what? The infant is here nursing while she's churning butter. I promise. The infant is slung over the back when she's out slopping the pigs. Don't let the kids slip. But women,
Cooking excellent.
or what you do when the kid is little, you just take your 6-year-old girl, you say, you watch the kid. When it needs to eat, you yell for mom. Yeah, there's no bottles.
Well, you have like nannies, right?
You can't afford that. Out on the farm? No, it's you on the farm. It's Andrea and Jason and their children, and that's it. Point is, pre-industrial revolution, women are heavily involved. What about the grandparents? They're still farming their own farm if they're alive.
Farm, not my farm. Help me out.
What about if they die? Can they like take custody of their?
Well, they very possibly, yeah. They do that. They're right, that they are willed, their parents' property. Yeah, of course. And then what they can do if they
Take
have a
their
farm,
house too and
if
everything.
they could move into their parents' house, that would happen. Or if they moved away a little bit, you sell it, and now they have more money to do stuff they seek to do.
What about if it was like side by side? Could they maybe like have like?
Yeah, they can combine it. You have a larger farm. Yeah.
Mister, how much would it be to,
Wait, don't
say you
kill
have
your
like
brain,
a
don't
good
kill
plot of
your
land,
brain.
good soil, a house and like equipment,
But if they do
if you wanna
pass-
buy that, how much would that be?
Back
From
then,
natural causes.
any number I give you wouldn't make any sense because you'd have to know how much milk was.
Would it be expensive, like,
It would not be beyond the means of saving for a couple years that anyone who could save for a couple years could in the end afford their own farm. Now, moving on. So my point is, there is no such thing back then, at the beginning, before the Industrial Revolution, all women worked. They worked in partnership with their husbands. Now, socially, on the other hand, a woman's role was more limited. Now, it was normal and expected that Jason and Andrea, in the privacy of their own home, could talk about politics and national affairs and foreign policy and all the stuff that he cared about. But it would have been a little strange, socially, for Andrea to be going on about, Andrew Jackson out in public. That was considered to be a little unseemly for a woman to do. So her social role is limited to the home and kind of the very local community. That Andrea might get together with some of the ladies from church, to do some things kind of on Sundays, but by and large her social role is limited due to her gender. Okay? So we have a vital economic role and a limited social role.
Family feud.
Come on up here, Ruben.
Don't even say a word.
Ruben,
Pick your husband.
pick a wife.
Diana.
You know who the girls are?
Diana.
Pick a girl. Any girl.
Isabel. He's like they're gonna judge her.
Come on, Diana.
She said pick me, or else.
It's cute when they have one like that. All right. Well, here
I would think.
we have Here we have Reuben, who is Jason and Andrea's oldest son. He grew up.
How was that possible?
Oh my god.
Wow, who's the real one? Alright, hush, hush.
Honestly, I just want to learn.
Reuben grew up on a farm, hated it. Thought it was boring. He could never understand his father, who was like, this is what it means to be free, to wake up when the sun comes up, and to be worried about no one, but he thought he was ridiculous. Stop taking pictures.
What was it?
Put your phone away.
Alright.
Reuben finds, meets, and marries a girl who's kind of a little bit of a rebel herself. She doesn't like living on a farm either. And Reuben hears that in the city of Elizabeth, which is growing with all these new factories, this revolution is going on economically. Reuben decides he's going to school a little, he has some talents, he has some skills. The last thing he wants to do is spend his life with his hands in the dirt, like his father, like his... And Reuben says, me and my wife, we are moving, we're going to try our luck, we are moving to the big city, we are out of here. And his parents say, okay, you know, good luck, God bless, come visit. And off to town, off to the city, all these new factories, off goes Reuben and his wife. Well, Reuben walks into one of these new factories, he has a talent, he has a skill, he walks up to the boss and says, you know, I went to school a little bit, I can draw, I can read, I can rap, I'm a really good artist. I want to work for your advertising department. And the factory owner says, all right, draw some pictures for me. He does. He says, you're hired. You can work for this company. We'll pay you this amount of money. You come 5 days a week, 9 hours a day, and you work for us for wages. Well, the first thing, he's got a job, he's got his young wife. What's the first thing they have to do?
House.
They've got to find a place to live.
Shelter.
There's no such thing. Well, there is in a church, but that's certainly not where you want to go. Reuben, with his promise of employment, goes a half mile down the road, finds a place to rent. Makes down an arrangement, and now he's renting a place. And now, for the first time, really, in human history, we have this fundamental change in something that we so much take for granted that we don't even think about it. But starting on Monday, when Reuben wakes up in the morning, what does he have to do?
Go to work.
Go!
To work.
To work.
Go.
To find a
Find a
He has
job.
to go. Oh my God, he has to go for all of human history. You worked where you lived.
Well, I got a goal.
And now, for the first time really, you have to, Reuben every day is going to get out of bed, get dressed, and go, leave his house for 8, 9, 10, 11 hours a day
Parents told you.
to work. This has so many effects on society. It affects how we live, where we live. What defines the good part of town? What defines the not so good part of town? At first he walks. Then as more and more people are walking, maybe they build a trolley line. For 5 cents, Reuben gets on a trolley, goes to work. Well, now here's the thing. What's Diana do? Now,
I make sure about the finance.
now things are changing because Reuben's making this middle class living. Reuben's making money. Maybe he got a raise. Now we start to get that social idea that if Diana has to work, something is wrong with Reuben. That if Reuben is not making enough money to support his own wife, there's something wrong with Reuben. Maybe he's drinking it all away. Maybe every day on the way home, he stopped loving his wife, he always hangs out with his friends at the local bar and drinks away his salary. Maybe, I don't know. Point is, Diana's life is going to be very different. Now, how many kids are they going to have?
Like,
You
Like one.
You are not.
1 or 2.
3, 4 at the most, 2, 3, 4. We are going to have fewer children for a couple reasons. Reason number one, all of a sudden, kids have become expensive and useless, much like you.
That's why
That is
You
true.
are,
That is true.
you are expensive and economically complete. Not even, you're worse than useless. Economically, you're an incredible drain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, yeah. Why
You
have
are
all of my mom?
expensive
iPads and iPhones.
and useless. That I'm gonna bet that most of you don't help pay the rent. Maybe some of you, but most of you probably. Point is, on the farm, kids are cheap and useful, but in town, kids are expensive and useless. Why are they expensive? Because Ruben has started to get into his head this middle-class American idea that I'm successful, I'm going to work so hard to make my children
What is school?
The best they can be.
have a better life than I do. That he starts to buy into this idea that this progression, that if this is my life, my children's life is going to be better than mine. And what does that mean? Well, now the kid's got to go to school, now the kid's got to have nice clothes, now the kid's got to be clean, now the kid's got to have piano lessons, now the kid's got to, learn how to sit. The kid has to learn how to be this nice little middle-class American kid. Whose responsibility is that going to be? Diana's. Diana's role is going to change. Diana is going to be put in a position where it is her expectation. She's not supposed to be working. If she's working, that means something's wrong with him. Her role in middle-class American society has become make sure the kids are virtuous and educated and clean, and they're polite, and they go to school, and they learn how to play the piano, and they sing, and they become these nice, middle-class, cheerful American citizens. And she's supposed to like it. That this is what we call the cult of true womanhood. Implying that Diana achieves her most womanly things when she is at home raising her good middle-class American kids.
Like, what would happen if they had like marital troubles? Like, would they
deal with them?
Would they ever get like?
No. Divorce is virtually unheard of. Maybe 1 to 2% of
Yeah,
married
Ruben,
couples.
you keep it for.
You're right. Married like that's it. You don't. That, like I said, maybe 1 to 2% of couples got a divorce.
If you weren't happy, suck it up,
Who's that?
Me.
Oh, she leaves after 3rd period. She's only here for 1 period.
He said that you should have
She could get a divorce under very limited circumstances. He leaves her.
He beats her.
He beats her. He drinks himself into an oblivion all the time. But besides those extreme cases, marriage was for life. And you figured out a way to make it work.
That's wonderful.
That's grounds for divorce. But the problem is, at this point, Diana has no independent way to support herself. So she's going to deal with it because she don't want her kids down on the street. There's no welfare, there's no Section 8 housing, there's no food stamps. What she would do if something terrible happened is crawl home. And that becomes a pride thing. You don't want to do that. You'd rather deal with your husband than have to go back to the farm and deal with your own parents.
Was it cheating? Like,
Was there cheating? Was there guys?
yes.
There you go.
Yeah.
Wait,
What? No, you was better. I'll leave
Now, we have to finish
like it happened.
the most important thing. And this connects to what we did on Friday. As Diana's children get a little older, they're not requiring so much direct care anymore. Diana's an intelligent young lady. She's always kind of been a little bit bored, maybe, taking care of the kids at home. This is the time of the Second Great Awakening. Second Great Awakening is this religious movement that says, get rid of sin in your own life. And Diana has worked hard to get rid of the sin in her life and in the life of her children. She makes sure they're clean and educated and polite. Reuben doesn't drink. Reuben does what he's supposed to do. He goes to work, he comes home. They hang out with their friends. They have a nice little marriage. They're happy. They have good kids. And what the Second Great Awakening says is once the sin is kind of taken care of in your own life, it is your responsibility to take the sin out of the life of your community. Second Great Awakening burns it into Diana's mind that she should be working to get rid of sin in her community. And what she does is she becomes heavily involved in those reform association movements. Women's roles in reform associations are vital. Goodbye.
Good.